So this presentation is what I call the world's biggest psyop, or how Team Trump built and controls an internet army you've never heard of. And what this story is about is we're going to start with a FBI leak that derailed Hillary Clinton in 2016 with her election campaign. And that attack vector has now been developed into a much larger internet army. So let's take a look and find out what this FBI leak was that actually derailed Hillary Clinton. So this part of the story begins in mid-2016 on a website called 4chan, which is an anonymous discussion platform. Anybody can post anything, but there's no way to prove or validate who you are or what you're saying. But on this website, we started to see these four unique voices: the White House insider, FBI anon, Q clearance patriot, and the US Navy anon. They were all claiming to be the same thing, some kind of high-level government insider that had specialist knowledge on Hillary Clinton, and that they were going to return power to the people. There was no way to prove any of this, but it was kind of interesting stuff that they were saying. However, as the election moved on, FBI anon started to say some very detailed things, in particular about uranium-1. This is Hillary Clinton selling off America's strategic uranium reserves. SAP's being sold off. This is special access programs. These are programs above top secret. Very detailed explanations of things happening, but there was no way to validate or prove if any of this was true or false. But a few months later, these people start to hit the headlines. Here we have Huma Abedin, which is Hillary Clinton's personal assistant, and her husband, Anthony Weiner. Now, Weiner has a problem. He keeps exposing himself to young girls on the internet. The FBI have got involved. They've gone to their home, they've arrested them, and they've taken their computers, their cell phones, and FBI anon starts coming back saying, we've got something on this laptop, on Anthony Weiner's laptop. We've got 650,000 State Department emails. We have evidence of corruption and money laundering of the Clinton Foundation. We've got special access programs. This was the dynamite. This was the gold mine. But of course, there's no way to validate whether any of this is true until a few days before the election, about 10 days before, Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater International, starts hitting the press, talking to anybody he can find to say that he has contacts in the FBI at New York. And they've discovered all of this stuff on the laptop, exactly what FBI anon was saying. But Prince takes it further. Prince says that the FBI in the New York office have been pressing to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton. The FBI at the high end are refusing to do this, so they're threatening now to leak the contents of this entire laptop online. FBI anon comes back and says, in order to prove that we mean it, here's one of the pictures that we've got off the laptop. So here we have what is supposedly Huma Abedin in the bedroom. It might be real, it might be photoshopped, but this is getting serious, so now it starts building a head of steam. So this is only 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, before the election. Well, 2 days later, James Comey, the former head of the FBI, comes out and says, we are reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of an unauthorized email server. And this is where I got interested, because it looked as though we'd seen real political pressure done in a public forum. We'd never seen anything quite like this before. So now I'm interested. Now I want to know what's happening, and I want to follow it a little bit deeper. So what happens next is Donald Trump wins the election. And those four voices that we've seen now start to converge. They come to a single unified voice that we call QAnon, or sometimes simply just Q. And it moves away from 4chan. It migrates to another website called 8chan, which is very similar. But 8chan has a method to publicly validate who's actually saying it. So although it's still anonymous, we can validate if this is Q or if it's not. And what begins to happen is we get this series of supposed intelligence leaks. And at this point, in November 2019, we now have over 3,500 intelligence leaks. And Q claims that this is the largest authorized intelligence leak in US history. So what are these intelligence leaks? Now, this is a wide-ranging conspiracy, if you will, that touches many different aspects. The one I'm going to focus on here is in Britain's involvement in creating the Russia narrative, that Donald Trump was an agent of Russia. So see, these are some of the early posts that Q put up. So you can see here we've got reread Five Eyes to avoid US data collection laws. Hussein. Everybody has a code word. So Hussein is Barack Obama. What is public? The dossier, Pfizer. But what is not public is that Five Eyes is involved with UK, Australia, that POTUS was targeted using a pushed Russian decoy meeting. There were campaign insertions. This was Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, John Brennan, James Clapper, and it was a national security White House Situation Room operation with UK and Australia set up. Is that true? There's no way to tell. There's no way to validate it. On the opposite panel, you can see here, ask yourself a very simple logical question. What is a Pfizer warrant application? It's a highly confidential, safeguarded product of the United States government. If a product of the US government, how did UK and Australia know what was listed inside of the package? Think of the call made to POTUS to prevent declassification. So you may recall Theresa May called up Donald Trump and said, please don't declassify your Pfizer warrants. So how did Theresa May know? I'm posting these two because I'm going to come back and show what they actually are. Because at the time they were posted, nobody could have known anything. So the question to ask is this really coming from inside the White House? And that we can categorically say yes. What I'll show you now is what we call a Q proof. This is when Q does something deliberately to prove that he's the real deal, that this is legitimate. This is one of the very first things that we saw. And this was, the post is, nothing is random, everything has meaning, plus, plus, plus. Then a few minutes later, Donald Trump makes a tweet ending in plus, plus, plus. This was Q beginning to teach the fan base how to communicate. This is how we're communicating with you. Look at timestamps, look at things that happen. So that's in its more simplest form. It later escalates into something far more sophisticated. So this particular one, we have a photograph of a watch, and we're told it's Donald Trump's watch. The time is 3:15, and this is back in January. And we're told it's a matter of national security. 2 months later, we get a picture of the watch again. The time is set for 3:42. And people are curious about this. What does it mean? It's engaging now. It's a puzzle. Well, we can't tell what happens until this, March 15th, 2019. Declaration of a national emergency on the southern border was authorised by US Attorney General William Barr in the Oval Office at 3:42 p.m. And it takes the internet a hot second to realise that we had the date and the time signalled as early as January. So this is a very solid Q proof. This is probably the most amusing of all of them. Q tells us they have two telephones. One is for Trump's Twitter, the second telephone is for Q. And quite often they're loaded with complimentary messages, but this is the most amusing. Trump tweets, "We already have a smocking gun about a campaign getting her dirt on their opponent. It was Hillary Clinton." Now, Trump has said the word smocking 3 times in his tweets, and people assume that it's a misspelling, but smocking is a real word. Smocking is body painting for sexual gratification. So that's on the Twitter phone, but meanwhile, on Q's phone, we get a smocking party. And it only takes the internet a matter of seconds to figure out who we're looking at. We have Barack Obama's National Security Advisor, Valerie Jarrett, and Hillary Clinton's campaign director, John Podesta. So we need to look at how credible these leaks are. Is there any truth to them? Can we actually validate anything? Well, the best story for this comes with North Korea, because Q would be consistently 3 months ahead of the competition. So if you remember when Donald Trump first comes to office, we are told that it's nuclear war with North Korea at any moment. This is really serious. Trump can't deal with the dictator. The news media is banging the war drums. We're about to have nuclear war. But Q starts saying something very different. Q tells us, North Korea is not being run by Kim. He's an actor in the play. Who is the director? The truth would sound so outrageous, most Americans would riot, revolt, reject, etc. Would it blow your mind if I told you Barack Obama has been to North Korea and perhaps there now? Why did his administration do little to slow their nuclear and missile capabilities? And why, after Barack Obama left office, all of a sudden North Korea has nukes and the tech to miniaturize for payload delivery within the US? This is the crucial point that Q keeps coming back to. Who controls North Korea? Who really controls North Korea? Don't think of a single person, think of a powerful entity. Now, over the next month or so, what Q begins to tell us is he paints a picture that at the end of the Korean War, North Korea was really hijacked, the Kim dynasty was hijacked by elements within the CIA, and that the CIA has really controlled North Korea for decades. Everything we've been seeing about war coming or launching missiles is really just theatre. So Trump is about to go to Asia and visit China for the first time. Just before he goes, there's a problem in North Korea with one of their mountains. What a coincidence. The mountain that housed North Korea's nuclear weapons and testing collapsed. Unbelievable timing. I wonder if critically important materials as well as scientists and the bomb makers were inside when it happened. So Trump then flies off to meet President Xi. He has dinner in the Forbidden City. And as he's leaving, he takes this photograph from Air Force One. Well, Q asks us, isn't that curious what's below? And of course the internet works out very quickly that we're looking at the North Korean border. Q then posts this picture saying, watch the water. We've got an old picture of Bill Clinton, but the water we're looking at is tumultuous, it's waves, it's crashing. And then a few days later, the North Korean official news agency puts out this picture with peaceful, calm, sun is setting. And Q says, water, why is this event big? What does it signify? Now to this, somebody comes and asks, will Trump meet Kim Jong-un? And we get the brilliant answer, he already did. Think back to the North Korean pictures. Everything has meaning. This will break the MSM. And probably the most famous of all the posts, thank you, Kim. Deal made. Clowns out. Strings cut. We took control. Clowns is clowns in America, short for CIA. And people asked, well, how did Trump and Kim meet? So think the Forbidden City. So that night when Trump went into the Forbidden City to meet Kim Jong-un, that was what was happening. And of course, the next thing, everything we know. Now, there's a twist on the tale here, because the people who are following Q, at this point, they now view Q as a valid and legitimate news source. If you compare it to somebody like CNN were convinced that there was going to be nuclear war, and they were doing everything they can to say that this summit would fail, that it was all a disaster, Trump couldn't do it, Trump didn't know what he was doing. And instead, Q is telling us that Trump and Kim have already met, they've made a deal, and you're about to see peace come to the Korean Peninsula. They could not have been any further apart, but it was Q who was accurate. It was Q who got it right. So for the people following, this became the absolute legitimacy. Now that's important, because what happens next turns this story into a Tom Clancy novel. So when Trump actually first landed in Singapore on his way to meet Kim Jong-un, he made this tweet, great to be in Singapore, excitement in the air. And Q then starts to drop some little hints that there was real excitement on the flight. So there's something happened as they were flying over there. And the first hint of this was this photograph of three mountaintops. And you may be able to see there's a little puff of smoke over on the right. We couldn't tell what this was until somebody in Alaska says, hey guys, I've just got this really strange picture on my webcam. And this was from a little weather station. And we have what appears to be a missile. People identified those mountaintops where we'd seen the puff of smoke. We have the date, the time, the location. They went back and looked at the flight of Air Force One and found it was directly overhead. Q is now telling them that a missile has been launched at Air Force One. Now, whether you believe that or not is almost inconsequential. It's not whether you believe that, it's whether the millions of people who are following Q believe it. And they've just watched Q predict that peace would come to the Korean Peninsula. So as far as millions of people are concerned, this is real. This really happened. And that's going to be important because now we're in the forces of dark and light. There are heroes and villains. And very soon they are going to be asked to contribute their efforts to help Donald Trump. This is probably one of the more interesting Q proofs, just to finish North Korea. Q told us that the missile was launched from a submarine, and Q then posted a picture of a submarine and asked people to search for it in Google, and it had never been seen. So at the very least, Q is able to publish pictures of submarines that have never been on the internet before. So how are the news organisations responding to this? If Q is so far ahead of the competition, surely they must want to say something about it themselves.
From signs at political rallies to online forums filled with talk of mind control and lizard people,
the dark web movement called Qanon, once only found in the fringe parts of the internet, now on Amazon's best-selling book list, outranking authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Dr. Seuss. Anonymously written, the book contains a compilation of unproven radical conspiracy theories suggesting high-ranking Democrats are part of a cult that eats children, claiming the government created AIDS and saying it's also behind the movie Monsters, Inc. Part of a government plan, it claims, to collect children's blood and give government officials a more youthful look.
Anyone can publish anything, and on the one hand, that creates some amazing opportunities, but it also means that some really toxic stuff can get out there.
The book is getting 5-star reviews, including several from people who admit they haven't even read it. But Amazon's algorithm seems to unintentionally reward that, pushing the book up the bestseller list and in effect promoting baseless conspiracy theories. The issue of misinformation on social media has in the past led other tech companies to take action.
Okay. So we've now built up this army. We've got millions of people who are following this. What do you do with them? Well, it turns out you ask them to create memes. So Q would then start to ask, can you make memes on this subject? Can you use these hashtags? Can you prepare memes on Pfizer corruption? And memes are something that on the right, and especially with Team Trump, they take very, very seriously. This has led to headlines like this: QAnon activists declare a 24-hour meme war. The first time I saw this was in the appointment of Judge Kavanaugh to become Justice Kavanaugh when he went to the Supreme Court. The Democrats were trying to make out he was some kind of crazy sex pervert who drank too much beer. And Q came and said, by the way, this woman, she took a lie detector test, but she failed it 4 times. And did you know that she's written papers on how to beat lie detector tests? As soon as Q said that, the memes started to come, and they just swamped social media. No matter where you looked, if it was Reddit, if it was Twitter, we were seeing information that this woman was somebody who knew how to beat a lie detector test. So that became quite important. You see there, QAnon is trying to trick Facebook's meme reading AI. This is from Facebook, who seem to be at the forefront of trying to protect us from harmful content. But memes have become a very important part of electioneering, or at least dominating social media. So this is one of the typical symposiums that you can go to teach you how to do it and teach you how to make memes that are better and more effective. But within the Trump campaign itself, Trump is very much on board with the meme idea. So this photograph was taken at a very important meeting that the press were brought in to discuss putting sanctions on Iran. And the moment Trump sat down, he unrolled a poster in a Game of Thrones style. They took a photograph, it went on Twitter, and it dominated the 24-hour news cycle. This is the importance. Memes actually dominate news cycles, and it completely swamps social media. That's what this is really about. Now, this has led on the Democrat side to push back, because if you haven't built an internet army of millions of people, the only route you've got is censorship. So that's why we see headlines like this about online Trump supporters will be entirely silenced by 2020. That's why people get shadow banned on Twitter. So the battleground now is control of the internet, of what content can go out and who gets to filter and who gets to choose. So to end this briefing, I'm going to talk a little bit about Britain's role in the Russia collusion hoax. And this is important because it's going to become an important step in the 2020 election. So this is a very early post from Q. What if the UK government worked hand in hand with Barack Obama's administration to sabotage the 2016 election? Data collection, voice, video bugging, creation of the fake intelligence dossier. And Q would post these rather cryptic looking posts. They almost look like computer code. But what we were actually getting, that we didn't realise at the time, is we were being told what the Russia hoax was about and how the spying on the Trump campaign was actually done. So I'll take you through that one. The Russia campaign, or the Russia hoax, begins with this man, Christopher Steele. Steele was at MI6 from 1987 till 2009. He, for the last 3 years, was the head of the Russia desk. He'd been paid by Hillary Clinton's team to come up with a dossier against Trump. So he went off to his friends at Yahoo News and told them that Trump was a Russian agent. They printed that article, and then he took that article and took it to BuzzFeed, took it to Drudge Report, and said, you see this article that Yahoo have published? I can confirm that because I was at MI6 on the Russia desk. So those websites then started to put out the articles as well. So these articles begin to form a dossier, but they're all circular. The only reference, the only source is Christopher Steele himself. And that dossier makes its way to the FBI. Now, at the same time as that, this man comes along, Alexander Downer. He's the Australian High Commissioner to Britain. He goes and meets George Papadopoulos, who is Trump's foreign policy advisor, in a London bar. He then calls up the FBI and says, we need to have a meeting. At that meeting, Downer tells the FBI that he believes George Papadopoulos to be a Russian spy in the Trump campaign. And that worked so well, they did it again. This is Stephen Halper, former MI6. He went and met Carter Page, who was also on the Trump team. And then he wrote a memo to the FBI saying, I think this guy's a Russian spy. So the FBI now have a dossier of all these journalists who have now found that there's links to Russia, and they have two targets. So they go to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, they get a warrant to be able to spy on George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. But they don't want to spy on them using their own domestic intelligence services, because that can open them up to various freedom of information requests. So this is outsourced through Five Eyes to GCHQ. So the whole Russia thing was started by an MI6 man, or former MI6 man, and the actual surveillance was done by GCHQ, and it was done at the request of Barack Obama. One of the interesting things is we now, because these documents have started to be declassified, and we now understand because people have given testimony on it, we can see the signatories here, James Comey and Andrew McCabe from the FBI, John Brennan, who was the head of the CIA at the time, James Clapper, who was the Director of National Intelligence. This rogues gallery keeps coming around again and again and again. This was John Brennan's anti-Trump task force that was assembled in early 2016. These names, the signatories, had all been told to us by Q much earlier. So Q, from the very beginning, in his cryptic way of giving just the initials, was actually telling us who signed the FISA warrants. So there's one final thing. If you do want to know who Q is, or what Q looks like, the best picture we have is this one. And with that, I thank you very much for your time.